From the moment we are born into this world, we are surrounded by invisible fences. They are not physical barriers made of steel or concrete, but psychological ones built from expectations, traditions, fear, and the constant whisper of, "That's just the way it is." These limits creep into our lives quietly, disguised as wisdom from parents, advice from teachers, and norms from society. You hear it when someone says, "Be realistic." You hear it when someone warns you, "Don't aim too high." You hear it when people laugh at ideas that sound too bold, too unusual, too impossible, and slowly, without even noticing, you start shrinking your vision to fit inside someone else's box. But here's the truth. Those limits are illusions. They are walls painted on glass, and the only thing holding them up is our belief in them. The moment you stop believing in the impossibility, the wall disappears. I've lived my entire life hearing the word impossible. Reusable rockets? Impossible. Electric cars that beat gas cars? Impossible. Colonizing Mars? Impossible. Yet here we are. The problem is not that humanity lacks capability. The problem is that humanity accepts limitation as truth instead of treating it as a challenge to be redesigned. Thinking beyond limits is not a luxury. It's survival. It's the only way we move forward as individuals and as a species. And it doesn't start with giant leaps or billion-dollar budgets. It starts in your own mind, in the quiet moment when you ask yourself, what if I'm wrong about what I think I can't do? This is the call I want to extend to you tonight. Stop living inside invisible cages built by other people's fears. Step outside. Think bigger. Push past the boundaries that everyone else accepts. Because those boundaries are nothing more than assumptions waiting to be broken. Think about history. Every breakthrough that reshaped civilization was once considered impossible. Flying through the sky in a machine heavier than air? They laughed at the Wright brothers. Splitting the atom? Too dangerous, too theoretical. Connecting billions of people through an invisible network called the internet? Science fiction? And yet here we are. What changed? Not physics, not the laws of nature. What changed was the willingness of a few individuals to ignore the limits everyone else had agreed to obey. They asked better questions. They refused to accept the default settings of the world. And then they built. That's the mindset I want you to carry into your own life. Don't start by asking if something is possible. Start by asking, what would need to be true for this to work? That single shift is the difference between dreamers and builders. A dreamer looks at the stars and says, it's too far. A builder looks at the stars and says, we'll need better rockets. One is a dead end. The other is the beginning of everything. Now, I know what you might be thinking. It's easy for Elon Musk to say this. He has money, resources, teams of brilliant engineers. But here's what most people forget. I started with nothing but questions and a ridiculous amount of persistence. I didn't know how to build rockets. I didn't know how to build cars. I had no experience in tunneling, brain interfaces, or AI. What I had was the belief that if I learned fast enough, tested relentlessly, and refused to quit, the limits that seemed impossible would eventually bend. And that same power exists in you. You may not be designing rockets, but you are designing your life. Every day, you are engineering decisions, prototyping habits, launching new attempts at the future you want. The question is not whether you can build something extraordinary. The question is whether you will dare to. Because daring is uncomfortable. It means failing in public. It means being called crazy, reckless, unrealistic. It means hearing no 1,000 times. But it also means that one day, when everyone else is still waiting for permission, you've already built the future they said couldn't exist. Thinking beyond limits isn't about optimism, it's about courage. It's not about saying everything will work out. It's about saying, even if it doesn't work out today, I will try again tomorrow. That's how rockets fly. That's how revolutions begin. And that's how lives are transformed. When you think beyond limits, you stop measuring your potential by where you are and start measuring it by where you could be. You stop asking, what's the safest path? And start asking, what's the path worth taking, even if it scares me? That's where growth happens. That's where greatness begins. Imagine your life 10 years from now. If you keep living by the rules and limits you've been handed, what will it look like? Safe, predictable, maybe comfortable, but also smaller than what you are capable of. Now imagine your life if you stopped accepting limits and started challenging them. If you stopped asking permission and started asking better questions. If you treated your dreams not as fantasies but as engineering problems waiting to be solved, That's not just a different life. That's a different you. That's a version of you that doesn't just survive the future, but creates it. The call to think beyond limits is not about me. It's not about rockets or cars or Mars. It's about you. It's about unlocking the impossible problem that has been sitting quietly in your life, waiting for you to stop pretending it's impossible. Maybe it's starting a company. Maybe it's writing a book. Maybe it's building a family, moving to a new city, launching an idea that makes zero sense to everyone around you but burns inside you like fire. Whatever it is, the limit you see is not real. It is just a design problem waiting for your courage to engage. And here's the final truth. No one else will do it for you. No one else can dream your dream. No one else can think your thoughts. No one else can push past the boundaries in your mind. That responsibility and that opportunity is yours alone. And when you accept it, when you stop waiting for someone else to give you permission, you will find that the walls around you dissolve. You will see not limits, but possibilities. Not barriers, but blueprints. Not endings, but beginnings. This is the call. Not to settle, not to shrink, not to obey the rules of a smaller world, but to think beyond limits, to design a life that defies gravity, to step into the future not as a passenger, but as a builder. And once you hear that call, you can never go back. Because once you see that the limits were never real, the only question left is, what will you build now? When people look at the future, most of them stop at the word impossible. They see a wall and they stop walking. But when I look at the future, I don't see walls. I see problems waiting to be engineered into solutions. That is the difference between possibility and impossibility. It's not about magic, luck, or talent. It's about engineering. It's about taking what looks like a brick wall and asking, how do we turn this into a door? People often believe that possibility is discovered, like a treasure waiting under the sand, but it isn't. Possibility is created. It is engineered step by step, question by question, prototype by prototype. And the truth is, it doesn't matter how large or small your dream is. The process is the same. First, you break down the problem until it is no longer intimidating. Then you test solutions, fail, adjust, and test again. Repeat enough times, and what was once impossible becomes inevitable. This mindset is what turned reusable rockets from science fiction into reality. Everyone said it couldn't be done because rockets had always been one-use machines, expensive fireworks shows that ended in the ocean. But I didn't ask, is it possible? I asked, what would need to be true for a rocket to land itself? And from there, the process began. Engineering possibility is not glamorous. It is messy, frustrating, and full of failure. But failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is data. Every crash, every miscalculation, every wrong turn is simply information telling you what doesn't work. And if you listen carefully, that same information points toward what might work. The people who give up too soon see failure as a dead end. The people who change the world see failure as feedback. That's the difference. If you want to engineer possibility in your own life, you must learn to love failure as much as success, because each failure brings you closer to the truth. I remember the early days of SpaceX. We had 3 failed launches in a row. Each one cost millions. Each one left us on the edge of bankruptcy. The world was laughing, critics calling us reckless, journalists writing obituaries for the company. Most people would have walked away, but we didn't. We studied every frame of video, every piece of data, every screw that didn't hold, and on the 4th launch, we succeeded. That single success changed everything. One success built on 3 failures carried us forward into a future no one thought was possible. That's what engineering possibility looks like, refusing to let failure have the last word. In your own life, you may not be launching rockets, but you are facing walls every day. Maybe it's a career that feels stuck, a dream that feels out of reach, or a relationship that feels broken. The instinct is to stop at the wall and accept it. But engineering possibility means asking better questions. If your career feels stuck, don't ask, why am I stuck? Ask, what would need to be true for me to break through? If your dream feels impossible, don't say, this is too hard. Say, what's the first prototype I can test today? If your relationship feels broken, don't ask, is this doomed? Ask, what actions can we take right now to repair the foundation? Every impossible wall hides a door, but the door only appears if you're willing to design it. This requires a mindset shift most people never make. Most people wait for permission. They wait for proof. They wait for someone else to try first. But engineering possibility is about refusing to wait. It's about building while everyone else is still talking. It's about saying, I don't need permission to create the future I want. I'll build it myself. That mindset doesn't just change companies, it changes lives. Imagine if you treated your own future like an engineering problem. Imagine you sketched your goals like blueprints, broke them down into smaller parts, tested each part, and refused to quit until the design worked. You would stop being a dreamer and start being a builder. That's how possibility becomes reality. People often tell me that my work is risky, but what they don't understand is that the bigger risk is doing nothing. The world doesn't stand still. If you wait too long, the future will be built by someone else, and you will spend your life living inside their vision instead of your own. The real risk is not failure, the real risk is regret. The regret of never trying, never testing, never building. That regret weighs more than any failed attempt ever could. So when I say engineer possibility, I'm not talking only about rockets or cars. I'm talking about how you live your life. Every decision is a prototype. Every setback is a test. Every success is a launch. And the more you treat life this way, the more impossible things you'll unlock. There's another truth people overlook: possibility scales. The moment you prove to yourself that you can make one impossible thing happen, you start believing you can make another happen, and then another. Confidence compounds. Success compounds. And suddenly, the person who once thought small begins to live big. The act of engineering possibility rewires your brain to see walls as opportunities instead of obstacles. You start asking better questions. You stop saying, that's just how it is, and start saying, how do we redesign this? That's the spark of every breakthrough. The moment when you stop accepting the world as it is and start building it as it could be. Let me tell you this. You don't need to be an engineer to engineer possibility. You just need curiosity, courage, and the refusal to quit. You need to train yourself to see problems not as punishments, but as puzzles. You need to treat your failures not as tragedies, but as test flights. And most importantly, you need to believe that every wall you face is not a prison, but a design challenge. Because when you believe that, you unlock the superpower that turns dreamers into builders. So here's my challenge to you. Pick one area of your life that feels impossible right now. Write down the wall that's in front of you. Then ask yourself, what would need to be true for this to become possible? Don't stop at excuses. Don't stop at fear. Push until you find an answer. And then start building. It won't be perfect. You'll fail. You'll doubt. But if you keep going, if you keep testing, if you keep engineering, one day you'll look back and realize that the wall was never real. It was just waiting for you to create the door. That's how possibility is engineered. Not by waiting, not by hoping, but by building, by failing, by rising, by refusing to quit until the impossible bends. That is the process. That is the mission. And that is the invitation I give you tonight, to stop waiting for possibility to arrive and start engineering it for yourself. Failure is the single most misunderstood concept in human progress. People are taught to avoid it, to fear it, to treat it as the ultimate verdict on their worth. From school grades to career paths, society frames failure as a red mark, a permanent scar. But in reality, failure is not the enemy, it is the forge. It is the fire that burns away weakness and reveals what is strong enough to endure. I've lived inside failure more times than I can count, and if there is one truth I've learned, it is this. The difference between those who succeed and those who give up is not talent, not luck, not resources. It is resilience. It is the ability to stand inside the flames of failure and refuse to let them define you. I remember the early years of SpaceX, when failure was not abstract but painfully, humiliatingly real. 3 rockets, 3 explosions, 3 public reminders that the dream of reaching orbit might have been too audacious. With each failure, investors pulled back, critics sharpened their knives, and even friends questioned my sanity. We were on the edge of bankruptcy. Everything I had built, every ounce of my credibility, was hanging by a thread. And yet, even in those moments, I refused to surrender. Because failure, to me, was not the final word. It was data, it was feedback, it was the universe saying, not this way, try again. That mindset is what saved us. On the 4th attempt, Falcon 1 reached orbit. That single success outweighed every failure, not because it erased them, but because it proved they were not in vain. That is resilience. Not avoiding the fall, but getting up so many times that eventually gravity itself loses interest in pulling you down. Resilience is not glamorous. It doesn't come with applause. It often feels lonely, exhausting, and impossible, But it is in those exact moments when resilience is tested that your future is being written. When everything inside you screams to quit, when logic says it's over, when the world is pointing and laughing. Resilience is the quiet decision to take one more step, to try one more time, to refuse to die on the battlefield of your dream. People ask me all the time how I handle failure. The answer is simple. I don't handle it. I study it. I dissect it. I use it. Failure is not something you survive. It is something you learn from. Every time a rocket blew up, we didn't just shrug and try again. We pored over the wreckage, analyzed every detail, asked every uncomfortable question. What failed? Why? How do we design against it next time? That process of facing failure head on, with honesty and without excuses, is what transforms it into resilience. Most people don't fail because their dream is impossible. They fail because they quit too soon. They mistake one setback for a verdict, one rejection for a death sentence. But resilience is about zooming out. It's about realizing that one failure is just a frame, not the entire film. The story is not over until you stop writing it. Think about Thomas Edison. He tested thousands of materials before finding one that worked for the light bulb. Thousands of failures, each one teaching him something, each one bringing him closer to success. Resilience is not about avoiding those thousands of failures. It's about enduring them long enough to get to the one success that changes everything. Resilience also requires redefining your relationship with pain. Pain is inevitable. It comes with failure, with setbacks, with rejection. Most people run from it, but resilience means leaning into it, letting it sharpen you. When a rocket explodes, it's painful. Years of work vanish in seconds. But inside that pain is hidden knowledge, a lesson that could not have been learned any other way. If you're willing to endure the pain, to study it instead of avoiding it, you transform it into strength. That's why resilience isn't just about pushing through, it's about transforming what hurts into fuel. It's about turning scars into maps. In my own life, I've found that resilience isn't just necessary in business or innovation, it's necessary in everything. In relationships, resilience is choosing to work through conflict instead of walking away. In personal growth, resilience is getting up after you fail yourself, after you make mistakes you swore you wouldn't make. Resilience is not selective, it applies everywhere. And that's why it is the most important skill you can develop if you want to build anything that lasts. Here's the hard truth. Resilience is built, not given. No one is born with unshakable resilience. You build it by failing, by struggling, by getting knocked down more times than you thought you could endure. Every time you rise again, you are not just continuing. You are becoming stronger. Resilience compounds. It grows like muscle. The more you test it, the more it can carry. But if you avoid failure, if you avoid challenge, if you never put yourself in situations where resilience is required, you stay weak, you stay fragile. The only way to build resilience is to put yourself in the fire. That means pursuing goals that scare you, dreams that risk failure, ambitions that make you uncomfortable. It means daring to fail, not because you want to fail, but because failure is the price of growth. If you never fail, you're not aiming high enough. Resilience is also contagious. When one person demonstrates resilience, it inspires others to keep going. When SpaceX finally succeeded after repeated failures, it didn't just validate us. It inspired an entire industry to believe that rockets could land themselves. Resilience creates ripples. Your resilience in your own life might inspire your kids, your friends, your colleagues. It might show them that failure is not the end. It might give them the courage to keep building their own dreams. And that is why resilience matters not just for your own success, but for the success of everyone who watches you. There's another piece to resilience that people forget. It requires vision. You don't endure pain, struggle, and failure for no reason. You endure because you see something on the other side that makes it worth it. For me, it was the vision of reusable rockets, of humanity becoming a multiplanetary species. That vision gave me the strength to keep going when the money ran out, when the critics circled, when the rockets exploded. Without vision, resilience collapses into suffering. But with vision, resilience becomes unstoppable. You need a why. You need a future so compelling that it justifies the pain of failure. And when you have that, you can endure anything. In the end, resilience is the ultimate competitive advantage. Technology can be copied, ideas can be stolen, capital can disappear. But resilience, the sheer unwillingness to give up, that cannot be replicated. that belongs only to you. And it is the one thing that ensures that no matter how many times you fail, you will eventually win. So if you take anything from this message, let it be this. Don't fear failure. Fear quitting. Don't fear setbacks. Fear surrender. Every time you fail, you are not stepping backward. You are stepping forward into the information that will one day make you unstoppable. Resilience is not just survival. It is transformation. It is the alchemy of turning every defeat into the foundation of victory. Build it, test it, live it. Because in the face of failure, resilience is the only force that guarantees you still have a future worth fighting for. Vision is often misunderstood. People hear the word and think of a vague dream, a picture painted in the clouds, an idea that sounds nice in conversation but rarely leaves the comfort of imagination. But real vision, the kind that changes industries, reshapes societies, and redefines what people believe is possible, is not a cloud. It is a gravitational force. It pulls you forward even when every obstacle stands in your way. It bends reality because it demands that the world rearrange itself to fit what you see so clearly in your mind. I've been called a dreamer my entire life, but what people miss is that my dreams have teeth. They bite into the fabric of reality and refuse to let go until they manifest. That's the difference between daydreaming and vision. Daydreaming is a distraction. Vision is a blueprint. Vision doesn't just live in your head. It leaks into every decision, every conversation, every risk you take. It is the compass that keeps you moving when logic says turn back, when fear says stop, when failure whispers that it's over. Vision is not optional if you want to build something extraordinary. It is oxygen. Without it, your work suffocates. With it, you can survive deserts of doubt and oceans of resistance. Think about it. Every breakthrough we admire today once looked insane. Airplanes, electricity, the internet. At the moment of conception, they were ridiculed. They violated the logic of the time. And yet, they exist today because someone's vision bent reality until the impossible became ordinary. When I said we could build reusable rockets, most of the aerospace industry laughed. When I said we could build an all-electric car that outperforms gas cars, most of the auto industry scoffed. But I didn't say these things because I thought they would be easy. I said them because I couldn't stop seeing them. The vision burned too bright to ignore. And once you see something clearly enough, you can't unsee it. You either chase it or live in regret. That is the power of vision. Vision has another quality. It is contagious. When you hold a vision with enough conviction, others start to see it too. At first they call you crazy, but slowly your belief infects them. They start to imagine. They start to hope. They start to act. Vision spreads like fire, and once it spreads far enough, it becomes unstoppable. That's why leaders throughout history have been defined not by what they built, but by what they saw before anyone else. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't just fight for civil rights. He had a dream. Steve Jobs didn't just build computers. He envisioned a world where technology was an extension of human creativity. These visions bent reality, and we live inside their ripple effects every day. But here's the truth most people avoid. Vision is expensive. It demands sacrifice. It isolates you. It forces you to walk roads no one else wants to walk. People will call you arrogant, delusional, reckless, and maybe you are, but that's the price. Vision requires you to live partly in the future, to believe in what isn't visible yet, to take action when everyone else is paralyzed by doubt, and that gap between what is and what could be is uncomfortable. It is lonely, but it is also where transformation begins. I've learned that vision is not just about seeing a destination, it is about reverse engineering the steps to get there. Anyone can say, I want to go to Mars. Vision is asking, what rockets do we need? What fuel efficiency is possible? What life support systems can sustain humans? Vision is details. Vision is engineering. Without the blueprint, the dream remains vapor. But with the blueprint, the dream becomes inevitable. Vision also requires resilience, because reality does not bend easily. It fights back. It throws scarcity, doubt, and fear in your path. Every vision is tested by failure. Every dream is sharpened by rejection. If your vision collapses the first time it is laughed at, it was never a vision, it was just a wish. But if your vision withstands ridicule, survives bankruptcy, and endures sleepless nights, then it becomes something else entirely. It becomes destiny. And destiny has gravity. One of the things I've noticed about visionaries is that they don't just see a different future. They see the hidden potential in the present. Most people look at the world and accept it as it is. Visionaries look at the same world and see what it could be. Where others see a roadblock, they see raw material. Where others see impossibility, they see untested opportunity. Vision is a lens. It filters reality until possibility becomes visible, and once it's visible, it becomes reachable. Here's what I want you to understand. Vision is not about being right all the time. I've had visions that failed. Not every project becomes Tesla. Not every experiment becomes SpaceX. But the act of holding a vision, of pursuing it with everything you have, is never wasted. Even when you fall short, you move the needle of human progress. You expand the boundary of what's possible. You inspire others to see further than they could before. That's why vision is never selfish. Even if your dream doesn't fully manifest, your pursuit of it changes the landscape for everyone who comes after you. Vision is legacy in motion. Vision also demands courage. It requires you to be misunderstood for years, to endure mockery from people who can't see what you see, to wake up every day and keep walking toward a horizon no one else believes exists. It requires faith in your own mind, in your ability to manifest what others can't yet comprehend. This courage is not born from arrogance, it is born from necessity. Because if you don't have the courage to defend your vision, no one else will. And if no one defends it, it dies. I believe the future belongs to those who dare to imagine it first. The world doesn't change by accident. It changes because someone holds a vision so fiercely that reality eventually bends to accommodate it. And the question you must ask yourself is this: what vision are you holding? What future burns so brightly in your mind that you cannot ignore it, even if it costs you everything? If you don't have an answer, find one. Because a life without vision is a life at the mercy of other people's dreams. But a life with vision, even if it's never fully realized, is a life of impact, a life of purpose, a life that shifts the world even slightly closer to something better. Vision is not magic. It's not a gift from the universe. It's a choice. It's choosing to look at the world and refuse to accept its limitations. It's choosing to see not just what is, but what could be. And then it's choosing, again and again, to walk toward that vision until reality has no choice but to yield. That is how reality bends. That is how the impossible becomes inevitable. And that is why vision, more than anything else, is the most powerful force in the universe. Innovation is not a department, it's not a buzzword, and it's not a quarterly objective. Innovation is a way of life. It's a mindset, a discipline, a daily decision to look at the world not as it is, but as it could be. Too many people think innovation is reserved for labs, for scientists in white coats, or for Silicon Valley startups burning through venture capital. But the truth is, innovation is the natural human state when we stop being afraid of failure. It's the ability to ask a simple but powerful question every single day. How can this be better? That question applies to rockets and cars, but it also applies to your morning routine, to how you treat people, to how you approach problems in your own life. Most people live reactively, waiting for instructions, waiting for the path to be drawn by someone else. Innovators don't wait, they draw the map. They take the risk of being wrong because they know that the only alternative is irrelevance. Innovation requires you to embrace discomfort, because innovation doesn't happen when you're satisfied. It happens when you are restless, when you look at something everyone else accepts, and you say, no, this isn't good enough. That moment of dissatisfaction is the seed of progress. I looked at cars running on gasoline, choking cities with pollution, and thought, we can do better. I looked at rockets that were thrown away after one use, billions of dollars wasted, and thought, this is insane. Innovation is born when you refuse to accept insanity as normal. But innovation is not just about big world-changing projects. It's about small, daily habits. It's a lifestyle of questioning assumptions. Why do we do it this way? What if we tried something different? What if the answer everyone agrees on is actually wrong? That willingness to challenge orthodoxy is uncomfortable. It makes people roll their eyes. It gets you labeled as difficult or unrealistic, but that's the cost of progress. Innovation is not polite. It doesn't ask permission. It breaks patterns, rewrites rules, and builds new systems from the ground up. And if you want to live a life of impact, you have to make peace with that disruption. The truth is, innovation is not about intelligence, it's about courage. Plenty of smart people see better solutions, but are too afraid to voice them, too worried about looking foolish, too attached to their reputation to risk failure. But innovation doesn't come from playing it safe. It comes from trial and error, from experiments that blow up in your face, from ideas that sound ridiculous until they work. When SpaceX tried to land rockets vertically, Most experts said it was impossible. They weren't wrong based on the knowledge at the time. But innovation is about pushing past what we know into what we haven't yet discovered. And the only way to get there is to try, fail, learn, and try again. Failure, then, is not the enemy of innovation. It is the raw material. Every failure is data. Every mistake is a prototype. Every setback is an iteration. Innovation is not a straight line. It's a messy, nonlinear, unpredictable process. But if you stick with it long enough, it produces breakthroughs that change everything. Living a life of innovation means redefining your relationship with failure. Instead of shame, you see lessons. Instead of defeat, you see feedback. Instead of stopping, you keep iterating. That's how rockets eventually land themselves. That's how cars drive on electricity instead of gasoline. That's how impossible problems become solvable. Innovation is also deeply personal. It's not just about what you build externally, it's about who you become internally. When you adopt innovation as a lifestyle, you are constantly reinventing yourself. You ask, what habits are holding me back? What skills do I need to learn? What beliefs no longer serve me? Innovation forces you to shed the old version of yourself over and over until you are no longer a fixed identity but a living experiment. That's how you grow. That's how you evolve. Too often people think of innovation as a single event, a light bulb moment. But real innovation is iterative. It's the grind of experimentation, the daily discipline of improvement. It's the 100-hour work weeks, the endless meetings where you refine one detail, the willingness to tear apart your own work and rebuild it from scratch because you know it can be better. It's not glamorous. It's not even fun most of the time, but it's necessary. And if you stay with it long enough, the world eventually calls it genius. Innovation as a lifestyle means you stop asking, what's the minimum, and start asking, what's the maximum? Instead of coasting, you push. Instead of waiting, you create. Instead of assuming, you test. Innovation demands energy, focus, and resilience. It requires you to surround yourself with people who share that hunger, who refuse to settle, who are willing to look foolish in pursuit of progress. Because innovation is not a solo act, it's a culture. It spreads through teams, through organizations, through communities. One person's boldness ignites another's. One person's crazy idea inspires another's breakthrough. And together, you create momentum that nothing can stop. But here's the paradox. Innovation also demands humility. Because the moment you think you know everything, you stop innovating. The moment you cling to your ego, you stop listening. And when you stop listening, you stop learning. Innovation requires you to be confident enough to try, but humble enough to admit when you're wrong. That balance between audacity and humility is what makes innovation sustainable. Without it, you either burn out or stagnate. With it, you can keep going forever. Innovation as a lifestyle also means applying creativity where others see limitations. When resources are scarce, you innovate. When time is short, you innovate. When conditions are brutal, you innovate. Pressure is not a barrier, it's fuel. That's why startups often outpace big corporations. They don't have the luxury of waste. They have to innovate or die. And that urgency produces breakthroughs. The same is true in life. When you are under pressure, when you have nothing left to lose, that's when your most creative self emerges. Innovation is not about luxury. It's about survival. And survival, paradoxically, produces greatness. I want you to see innovation not as something distant or abstract, but as something you can live every single day. Ask better questions, refuse lazy answers, embrace failure as data. Live with a restless dissatisfaction that propels you forward. Treat your life as a prototype. Tear it apart, rebuild it, improve it. Don't fear being wrong, fear being irrelevant. That is innovation as a lifestyle. And once you adopt it, you will never look at the world the same way again. Because everywhere you look, you will see opportunities not just to accept reality, but to shape it. Progress is often measured in numbers. How fast a rocket flies, how many cars are sold, how much capital is raised, how many patents are filed. But behind every number there are people. People with hopes, fears, sacrifices, and families who carry the weight of those ambitions. Progress is not just a graph on a chart or a headline in the news. It's human lives woven into the fabric of something greater. Too often in our culture, we glorify the outcome while ignoring the process. The engineers who spend sleepless nights debugging lines of code, The technicians who risk their hands and health assembling machines that will travel beyond Earth, the spouses and children who miss dinners and birthdays so that one more milestone can be hit. Real progress is not built by machines, it's built by human grit. When we talk about rockets going to Mars or cars running without gasoline, it's easy to think of the technology as the story. But the deeper story is about resilience, about ordinary people doing extraordinary things because they believe in a vision bigger than themselves. That is the human side of progress. I've seen it firsthand. At SpaceX, there were nights when failure felt inevitable, when rockets exploded and critics celebrated. What most people didn't see were the faces of the men and women who poured their souls into those rockets, people who watched their work vanish in fire but showed up the next day ready to build again. That's not just engineering, that's courage. And courage is the most underrated element of progress. Courage to keep going when everything screams stop. Courage to believe in possibility when all the evidence points to impossibility. Progress demands courage not just from leaders but from everyone who touches the mission. It is not enough to have a CEO with vision. Vision without a team willing to sacrifice is worthless. Progress is a collective act of faith. It is built in the late nights, the broken prototypes, the whispered encouragements between teammates who refuse to quit. It is built in the unseen moments that never make headlines but form the backbone of every breakthrough. The human side of progress is also about sacrifice. Innovation doesn't come free. It asks you to give up comfort, stability, sometimes even relationships. It's not glamorous. It's messy, it's painful, it's often lonely. I've lost friends, I've lost marriages, I've lost countless nights of sleep to the pursuit of something bigger than myself. And every person who joins a mission of progress faces their own sacrifices. Some sacrifice time, others sacrifice financial security, others sacrifice the illusion of certainty. But every great leap forward is carried on the shoulders of people willing to bear that weight. That's why I always say progress isn't about machines, it's about people. Machines break, people rebuild, machines fail, people adapt. Machines are tools, people are the reason. If you forget that, if you reduce progress to numbers and forget the human heartbeat inside it, you lose the very soul of innovation. The human side of progress is also about empathy. You can't build for humanity if you don't understand humanity. Technology for its own sake is empty. Progress that ignores people is not progress, it's distraction. That's why every mission, whether it's to colonize Mars or electrify transportation, must be rooted in the belief that people matter. That what we are building is not just efficient, but meaningful. Not just powerful, but empowering. Not just profitable, but purposeful. Empathy makes progress sustainable. Without it, progress becomes exploitation, and exploitation eventually collapses. To sustain progress, you have to remember why you're building in the first place. Not for shareholders, not for ego, but for people. For kids who dream of the stars, for families who want cleaner air, for communities who deserve hope. That's the fuel that lasts. Too many people think of progress as destiny, as if it just happens automatically with time, but history proves otherwise. Civilizations rise and fall not because of machines, but because of values, because of what people choose to prioritize. And that means the human side of progress isn't optional. It's the core. Without it, progress is fragile. With it, progress is unstoppable. I want you to imagine something. A rocket standing on a launch pad, gleaming in the sunlight. It's a marvel of engineering, millions of parts working in harmony. But ask yourself, what really holds it up? It's not the steel, it's the people. The welders who joined the metal, the designers who drew the blueprints, the project managers who kept the chaos coordinated, the janitors who cleaned the floors so the teams could work safely. Progress is never one person. It's thousands of invisible hands lifting together. That's the truth we often forget in the age of celebrity CEOs and viral headlines. The story isn't me, it's us. Progress is also deeply emotional. We like to think of innovation as rational, as data-driven, as pure logic, but that's a myth. Logic alone doesn't make you work 100 hours a week. Data doesn't keep you going after your fourth failure. Spreadsheets don't inspire people to believe in Mars. Emotion does. Vision does. Love does. Love for humanity. Love for the future. Love for your team. Love for the impossible dream that pulls you forward when reason tells you to quit. That's the hidden engine of progress. Emotion is not weakness. Emotion is fuel. And when you combine that fuel with discipline, you create something unstoppable. But here's the paradox. The human side of progress also requires balance. If you burn people out, if you ignore their humanity, if you demand everything and give nothing back, progress collapses. You can't run a rocket company without also building a culture where people feel seen, valued, and supported. The work is brutal, but the mission is meaningful. That's what keeps people going. That's what prevents despair from turning into defeat. You can't forget the human in pursuit of the superhuman. The last truth about the human side of progress is this: it makes the struggle worth it. Technology alone doesn't give life meaning. But when technology is fused with human resilience, empathy, and sacrifice, it becomes more than wires and steel. It becomes hope. Hope that we can do better. Hope that tomorrow can be brighter. Hope that the impossible is possible. And that hope is what truly defines progress. So when you think about the future, don't just think about the machines we'll build or the milestones we'll hit. Think about the people. The teams who stay late, the families who support them, the kids who dream bigger because they saw someone dare. Think about the human side, because that's where progress actually begins and ends. And if you remember that, if you build with humanity at the center, then no matter how far we go, whether it's Mars or beyond, we'll know that we didn't just build machines. We built meaning. And that is the only kind of progress worth fighting for. When I talk about Mars, or building a city on another planet, most people immediately think about rockets, propulsion, habitats, radiation shields, and all the technical challenges that fill textbooks and research papers. But that's not really the essence of it. At its core, going beyond Earth isn't about escaping problems here or indulging in some science fiction fantasy. It's about pushing against the limits that have always defined us and asking the question, what if those limits aren't real? Humanity has lived for thousands of years inside a box defined by gravity, atmosphere, and geography. We have been confined to one pale blue dot, protected by a thin layer of air, and bound by the idea that this is all there is. But every time we've accepted a limit as permanent, someone came along to prove it wasn't TEM. Flight was impossible, until the Wright brothers proved otherwise. Electricity in every home was unthinkable, until Edison and Tesla electrified the world. Landing on the moon was a fantasy, until Apollo 11 left bootprints in the dust. Limits are illusions waiting to be shattered. That's why I think about Mars not as an escape plan, but as the next logical step in our evolution. Because if humanity is to survive for the long haul, we cannot remain a single-planet species. That's just math. Asteroids hit. Climate changes. Civilizations collapse. But if we have multiple homes, multiple outposts of life, then no single catastrophe can erase us. Beyond Earth lies security. But beyond Earth also lies meaning. Because it's not just about survival, it's about becoming more than we've ever been. When we step onto Mars, we are stepping into the next chapter of what it means to be human. And that's not just science. That's spirit. I know this sounds grandiose, but it's practical too. Every frontier humanity has crossed has made us stronger. When settlers crossed oceans to build new worlds, they didn't just find land. They found courage. They found innovation. They found resilience in the face of the unknown. Mars is simply the next ocean, the next horizon. And like every frontier, it will force us to grow. It will demand new technologies, new ways of thinking, new forms of cooperation. It will challenge us to become tougher, smarter, and more united than ever before. That's why I see it as more than engineering. It's a test of our character as a species. When you think about it, space has always represented possibility. Look up at the night sky and you see infinity. Stars scattered across a canvas so vast your mind can barely comprehend it. For most of history, that infinity was off limits, something to dream about but never touch. Now, for the first time in human history, we hold the tools to make it real. We can reach out and place our hands on that infinite canvas. That's the meaning of going beyond Earth. It's about refusing to let fear dictate our destiny. Fear says stay home. Fear says Earth is enough. Fear says don't risk failure. But history belongs to those who looked fear in the face and moved anyway. And that's the challenge of our time. Will we choose safety, or will we choose significance? Going beyond Earth isn't just about rockets. It's about imagination. It's about daring to picture a world where kids grow up on Mars, where we terraform deserts into gardens, where human creativity spills across the solar system instead of being locked on one fragile planet. That vision changes how we live right now. It makes us think bigger. It reminds us that we are not trapped, that the impossible is simply the frontier waiting for courage. I've been told more times than I can count that this vision is unrealistic, that the costs are too high, the risks too great, the challenge is insurmountable, but I've heard that before. I heard it when we tried to land rockets vertically. I heard it when Tesla set out to replace gas cars. I heard it when people said private companies had no place in space exploration. Every breakthrough is ridiculous until it isn't time. Every limit is absolute until it isn't. And every impossible dream is laughable until it launches. Beyond Earth, we learn humility. Because space doesn't care about your ego. It doesn't care about your credentials, your reputation, or your confidence. It is brutal, unforgiving, merciless. It forces you to respect the laws of physics, to prepare relentlessly, to embrace failure not as shame but as tuition. That's why going to Mars is the ultimate teacher. It humbles us, it sharpens us, it forces us to become the best version of ourselves or perish, and I think that's a good thing, because humanity needs challenges that stretch us to the breaking point. Without them, we stagnate. With them, we evolve. Beyond Earth also redefines love and connection. People assume that space is about machines, but it's really about people. Imagine families one day living on Mars, building schools, telling stories under a different sky, watching their kids run across red soil. That's not just technology. That's humanity expanding its home. It's love across planets, connection across millions of miles. It's the most profound statement we can make, that no matter the distance, no matter the difficulty, humanity will choose to keep going, to keep building, to keep creating a future worth living in. When I say beyond Earth, beyond limits, I don't just mean physically, I mean mentally, spiritually, emotionally. The act of reaching for the stars forces us to break free from the limits we've built in our own minds. Limits that say we can't change, we can't grow, we can't dream bigger than survival. Beyond Earth is a reminder that survival is not enough. We are here to thrive, to expand, to imagine futures that inspire awe. This is not just my dream. It belongs to every child who looks at the night sky and feels wonder. It belongs to every skeptic who secretly hopes to be proven wrong. It belongs to every person who dares to believe that humanity's story is just beginning. Because the truth is, Earth is beautiful but temporary. The universe is vast and waiting, and we are the species foolish enough or brave enough to go find out what's out there. So, yes, beyond Earth there are risks, there are costs, there will be failures, but beyond Earth there are also new beginnings, new dreams, new definitions of what it means to be human. And in the end, that is worth every risk, every failure, every sacrifice. Beyond Earth is not about escaping who we are. It's about discovering who we can become. And if we dare to cross that line, if we dare to push past those limits, then the legacy we leave will not just be footprints in Martian soil. It will be proof that humanity chose courage over comfort, significance over safety, and the infinite over the familiar.